Indians, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. This is your host, Misbah Azam. With me is Mr. Riyaz Haq and our own Ali Hassan Samantur joining us on Skype. Today we are going to discuss three topics. First one, I will ask my panelists to shed some light on the recent murder of Canada newspaper, Canada Weekly's editor, Gauri Lankesh in Bangalore. She was murdered while she was going to her house and somebody shot her at around 8 p.m. at night, allegedly by some right-wing extremist. So, of course, we will talk about that. Then we will spend some of our time talking about the deferred action for childhood arrival. This is called as DACA in the short form. Recently, this is the law which was implemented by President Obama in 2012. And this law was made for those children who brought to United States by their parents who were illegal, and those children were under 16. So they got this temporary work permit and right to stay in United States. So President Trump repealed it, and according to the total number which were declared according to Forbes magazine, there are more than 800,000 people who would face the deportation if it will go further, and out of those, the Asians were almost 30,000. Indians were 5,500, Pakistanis are 2,800, and more of them were Latinos and Mexican. So we will talk about this issue. Last but not least, we will talk a little bit about the recent declaration came out from the BRICs Summit, which was in China, and I will ask my panelists to comment on that how the whole region should see that, especially how Pakistan should see that, because in that declaration, without naming Pakistan or without even blaming Pakistan, there were some associations which are involved in some kind of allegedly activities inside India. They were named as a terrorist organizations, and it was being said in the declaration that these should be taken care with if we want to grow in economy and all. So, first of all, Riaz, how did you spend summer here? I mean, it was quite hot summer this time.
Yeah, I mean, during summer it wasn't so bad. It was just the last few days that have been really hot.
Really bad?
Yeah.
Over 100 degrees in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, which is usually very cool, it hit 106. So this climate change,
it's a record, right?
thing is real. Is something called global warming that's actually happening.
That is correct.
Because all the records are being broken, and not only in terms of temperature here, but also in terms of the intensity and the frequency.
Yeah.
Of weather events like the hurricanes.
That's true.
Like Hurricane Harvey hit Houston area. Now we're talking about Irma coming in to hit Florida. It's already flattened one of the islands called Barbuda.
Barbuda Island, that's correct. Yeah.
So yes, I mean this is a matter of concern.
Matter of concern. Samantur, what we know that there is a wildfire moving some direction towards north, and can you mention it? Did you see something there?
There's not only one. In fact, just this evening I went out to see. I am right now here in Trinity County, so I went out to see the fires. There are two different fires going on not too far from where I am, and they have all together burned more than 15,000 acres. And they have destroyed over 200 houses, And now these two fires, which were separate, now they're getting close and becoming one mega fire. So all this is happening, but this happens every year. Does not happen every year. Is this rising temperature that we are seeing every year is going up and up. And since we are in a show about South Asia, this global warming is going to affect South Asia very hard, and big parts of Balochistan, big parts of Sindh in Pakistan will become, you will not be able to live in those areas just hardly 10, 15 years down the line. So very alarming situation.
Yes, alarming situation. So let's come back to our topic. So Riaz, how do you see this martyrdom of Miss Gauri Lankesh? What do you see that? How do you see so many?
I think there is a trend in India. The right-wing Hindu nationalists are basically showing a great deal of fascist behavior, intolerance toward anybody who criticizes them. There have been several, public intellectuals who've been killed since Mr. Modi became prime minister. People like Dabolkar, Kalburgi, and now there've been one or two others, and then most recently Gauri Lankesh.
Yes.
Also, the journalists have been targets. There's a list that I saw somebody's published. There have been 20 journalists murdered in the line of duty doing their work since Mr. Modi became prime minister, and most of these are suspected to have been carried out by right-wing groups supportive of Mr. Modi. In fact, there is the way they do this is they have these large numbers of social media trolls that support Mr. Modi. They call them Modi bugs. In fact, some of these people are very abusive. They issue threats via Twitter. And in fact, Mr. Modi actually follows some of these handles.
Mr. Modi follows him.
So it seems like, there's a kind of a tacit endorsement of their activities. There is a woman by the name of Swati Chaturvedi who's written a book about it, about how these trolls operate. And it's not just, abuse and attacks through social media. It's now becoming a real physical threat. They're actually, attacking and killing people. So this is a very alarming trend. Now, the Reporters Without Borders says that India is now the third most dangerous country for journalists in the world after Iraq and Syria. In fact, according to them, the countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan are actually safer for journalists than India. So this is a very alarming trend for a country that calls itself a secular democracy to have these groups operate with impunity.
Samantur, so do you see this murder of a journalist for her critical views about the Hindutva reflects some kind of changing mentality in Indian society, or you think that it is just some one incident out of million good things?
This has been going on for some time, so this is not an isolated event, isolated murder. The thing is, since there has not been any arrest, we cannot say who killed her. Was it really because of her critical views of Hindutva? Although all the evidence, or not direct, but the evidence is there that it was probably by these Hindutva forces, because she had received threats, and very recently she installed a camera outside her house. So hopefully that would have captured something to point to the two people who came on a motorcycle and shot her. So let's see where it goes. But the thing is that it's pretty much a South Asian phenomenon now. It has been happening in Pakistan, very high profile. We saw it, Hamid Mir, and we saw this guy who was killed, kidnapped from Islamabad and killed. The guy who wrote the book, a couple of books.
Salim Shehzad.
Salim Shehzad, right. And then especially Balochistan has been a place where, it's really very hard for a journalist to operate with a free mind. So, but what I'm saying is that this is becoming now, India is also, following the same footsteps, which is not very good and not something that we think of India to be in that area, to have that kind of a leadership role, but we are seeing that it is sinking into this hole of extremism.
Well, and that is interesting that just today there is a statement, like a combined statement between Mr. Modi and Ms. Aung Suu Kyi of Myanmar, that they will together fight against Islamic extremism. So I don't know why Islamic extremism is one problem, Hindu extremism is not a problem.
Yeah, actually one of the things, though, I was listening to an interview today on PRI, this program The World, with Marco Werman. There was this Indian journalist by the name of Anu Puyan, who writes for The Wire, and she was saying that Muslim has now become a derogatory term in India. And these Hindutva groups, when they call somebody a Muslim, which is what they did in this case, they called Gauri Lankash a Muslim. That's an indication that they're very angry with them and they could be targeted next. So we talk about Islamic extremism, but there is very little mention of Hindu extremism when these discussions happened.
Yeah, because Islamic extremism is affecting the West, of course.
Yeah,
so that's why.
So that's the whole idea. The word terrorism and the label terrorism has become vogue, particularly since 9/11, when the United States decided that they were going to go after, the terrorists. Now, every country, whoever, was fighting somebody, whether it's the Russians fighting the Chechens, whether it's the Chinese with the Uyghurs, Indians in Kashmir, Israelis against the Palestinians. They used this label. They decided, hey, well, why don't we just use it for our own purposes? So now this has become a very facile label to basically describe anybody who's fighting them for whatever reason they're fighting, regardless. But this label of Islamic extremism, Islamic terrorism, suits their purposes, and they use it.
Samanto, do you want to add something?
No.
Okay. So let's go to the second topic. Riaz, with Samanto's permission, I will start from you. DACA. Talk to me. What's going on?
Yeah, so first let me explain what DACA is. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. What President Obama tried to do back in 2011-12, he tried pushing what he called the Dreamers Act. And the idea was that people who were brought to the United States as children, they did not come of their own free will, their parents brought them without documentation. And it's not through any fault of theirs that they're here. And they have now grown up here, they've gone to school here, they studied here. So they should not be punished for the actions of their parents. And they should be given an opportunity to legalize their status in this country so they can live, normal lives, that they don't have to live in the shadows. That Dreamers Act failed in Congress. The Republican Congress decided not to approve that. So after that action, President Obama decided to issue an executive order which said that we will not deport these people. We will give them permission to stay in this country on a 2-year rolling basis. There'll be permits issued, DACA permits, every 2 years. They can be renewed to these people. There's about the figures I saw. I was looking at the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service website, and I saw there are over 1 million people. Actually, 1.2 million.
Yeah, I saw that.
Is the figure I saw there.
Yeah.
Out of which about 1 million more than 1 million are actually either Mexicans or Central Americans, countries like Guatemala, El Salvador. And there are only 4, I saw that the list with the largest numbers. There's only 4 Asian countries that show in that list. The largest numbers, about 17,000, are from South Korea, and about 10,000 from the Philippines. There's about 7,500 Indians and about 3,400 Pakistanis. So those are the figures I saw. The only European country on the list is Poland. There are thousands of Polish people here as well. So that's what I've seen. Now, this is obviously a mistake because not only is it unfair to these kids who only know this country as their own, they've grown up here, they don't know their own countries, but also because it's an economic loss to the United States. Many of these are young, talented people. There's an estimate by Cato Foundation, which is a very right-wing group. And Cato says that there will be an immediate loss of like $60 billion if you deport these people, and then there will be another $280 billion loss over the next 10 years because we'll lose their contribution to the society. So it's not only an immoral thing to do, but it also doesn't make sense from an economic point of view.
Samantha.
Yeah, so those numbers are right, and this is not quite impacting as much Indians and Pakistanis as it would impact Mexicans, because for them crossing the border and coming here illegally is one thing, and people who are come in this DACA category, they came with their parents as legal visitors, and then the parents overstayed on their visa, and that's how these people became illegal, these kids, and then obviously they were going to school and all that. So that's what I'm saying is that this is a much bigger problem for Mexicans than the Pakistani or Indian community. And as far as DACA is concerned, you should know that this is not how the Trump administration sees this thing. For them, these are what they call anchor babies. What the thing is that this whole thing is meant to be a scheme for immigration. All the relatives would come once this kid becomes legal and becomes a citizen. And sometimes anchor babies is normally for babies that are born here. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, these people who came very young, they can also become anchor children that they can get other immigrants in. And that's how this administration and many people behind them see this case.
So you have to add anything?
Yeah, I think within the Republican Party there are two kinds of people. They have the social conservatives who are very anti-immigration. They don't want any non-white foreign people coming into the United States. They're totally opposed to immigration. But then you also have a fairly large chunk of the Republicans who are business people who see the need for immigration to keep this economy thriving, to keep this economy vibrant, because as the population ages and the fertility rate declines, you're going to need more young people to come to this country, particularly those with who are educated. So within the Republican Party, there's going to be a fight on this particular issue. It's not a clear, of course, Trump's base is mostly people who are, social conservatives or white, nationalists. So they obviously don't want to and they have this view that you just heard from Samantor. But the libertarians, particularly, and Cato instituted a libertarian think tank.
That's true.
They represent the business interests who want these people here.
So let's go to our final topic. So Riaz, how do you see this all situation in South Asia after these small groups? What China's main goal is that to create a new group and having all other countries out from here. How you see this BRICS group overall, and please explain that what kind of benefits they are talking about, and please talk about what is how it is going to impact India, Pakistan. Those declaration came from it. Yes.
Actually, BRICS is initially it was just BRIC, B-R-I-C. It was
South Africa,
coined by a Goldman Sachs executive by the name of Neil. What's that?
Jim O'Neill.
Jim O'Neill. He coined this term. And even then it didn't make a lot of sense because, these countries don't have a lot in common. I mean, you have India and China here in Asia, then you have Russia in Europe, and then you have Brazil in South America. So he just pulled them together without a lot of rhyme or reason. And we've already seen that Russia and Brazil have fallen by the wayside. Their growth rates have dramatically declined.
Yeah.
But they're still members of it. And then they decided to create a political bloc out of this by adding South Africa. They thought they should be one country from Black Africa. Even though, South Africa is not the largest economy in Africa. But they brought them in, as just a token. So now they think of themselves as a group, which is not really, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But, they want to get together, they want to talk about these things, and, it makes no sense for them to, make pronouncements about things like, the political problems, such as terrorism, such as the Haqqani group.
Some of the Chinese think tanks are questioning
this is just an abuse, a hijacking of a group. And this is what Mr. Modi does, wherever he goes, every organization, regardless of its purpose, he brings it up. I think his entire focus seems to be to somehow attack Pakistan and use whatever forums he can. And I think this is not going to work. I mean, already there are voices within China. The Chinese think tanks themselves are speaking out, saying, "Hey, this is nonsense. This makes no sense. Why did we participate in this? This declaration should not have come in the first place." And they have good reason. I mean, first of all, this bloc is not meant, to get into these issues, geopolitical, issues. It's supposed to be an economic bloc. The second thing is that they say that, hey, groups like Haqqani Group, for example, they control 40% of Afghanistan. And they're a political group. They're fighting. They're like a resistance group. So, you can call them terrorists. Terrorists is just anybody you don't like. Like India calls it, as we talked earlier. The label terrorist is applied to anybody who's fighting you, regardless of the purpose or the aims that they have. Whether it's Hamas in Palestine, or whether it's any of the groups that are fighting India and Kashmir, whether it's the Uyghurs, who want certain rights, they want, some autonomy in China, or the Chechens. So this is politics. It should be kept out of these forums.
Mm-hmm. Samatro, just say something on that about this same question actually what I asked Riaz. However, just also answer one thing, that how do you see Haqqani Group? Because Haqqani Group, the thing is that there is a legitimate government in Afghanistan, and if anybody fight against the government, it is like TTP fighting against Pakistan government. Yes, I agree, given that NATO forces were there and all that. How do you see that? Are you really considering fighting liberation armies, or you will see it more into it, like as Riaz mentioned, terrorist group?
No, first of all, I think Pakistanis should question what changed that China, whereas resisted to include this kind of language in last year's BRICS Summit, of including Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, but this year China did that, and I think the reason probably is North Korea, because China at this time needed India's support in having a declaration asking to not have tough sanctions against North Korea, not to aggravate the situation in the Korean Peninsula. And because of this, there was some give and take, and China was ready along with this East Turkmenistan, army that they have named, that they also included the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Now, as far as Haqqani network and TTP, especially TTP, Pakistanis are kind of slightly happy that the TTP, which has attacked, Pakistan, has been named as a terrorist organization. But in the end, I kind of disagree with Riyazat that this is something which should not be talked about in a summit which is for development. After all, development cannot take place in an atmosphere of political instability and where the different terrorist organizations are operating. But your question is very legitimate that if these terrorist organizations, you won't call them terrorist organizations, but if they are enjoying a large support of the population, then obviously you will have to have some kind of dialogue with them and some kind of a political settlement with them. Otherwise, this thing will not just vanish by just naming, organizations, terrorist organizations, calling them this way or that way. They will not go away unless the issues which are at the bottom of these things are solved.
Yes, you want to add because
I agree that in the end, they have to sit down and talk. They can't just declare somebody terrorist and start attacking them and expect that they're going to just disappear.
Because the people have
they're going to fight back.
Support, exactly.
They do have support.
Yeah, we like it.
These organizations have legitimate support out there.
Yeah.
So it cannot be just dismissed as terrorist. And even the United States, on the one hand they say, oh, these are terrorists. On the other hand they say, well, please help us talk with them.
That's correct.
So this is a kind of there's a lot of duplicity in the American policy itself.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, you saw our show, and we will be having more topics. Maybe there are more developments in these topics and other. And that's what our show for today. Keep watching Viewpoint from Overseas. This is your host, Ms. Baz.